So we're going to talk about today ROAS, so return on ad spend, and what does that mean for your franchisees? How do you present it to them? And how do you make sure that they're understanding exactly what you're delivering, what you're saying, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. So again, my name is Madeline Zook. I'm a franchisee, a franchisor, and a supplier. My husband and I are franchisees of 5 different home service brands, and I act as a chief marketing officer and a board member across a variety of franchise brands as well. So very, very intimately have knowledge of what it feels like to have the heartburn on both sides. So kicking this off is that even when we calculate ROAS, so return on ad spend, accurately, a lot of franchisees struggle to grasp what that even means. It's our responsibility as the franchisor to interpret this data, communicate how this metric can directly support local growth and decision making. And after this, I know I didn't send out the last recording. Quite frankly, I got lost in the sauce. That said, we have from the first session, Marketing 101, which covered the basics of marketing and the landscape as we see it in franchise marketing today. The last session was about calculating marketing to revenue. What does this look like? How much are your customers worth? And how much should your franchisees expect to invest? And then today we're talking about ROAS. So all comes down to, we've got our data. We know what the acronyms mean. How do we get the franchisees to act on what we are talking about? So again, we're covering ROAS. We're going to cover variables and communications today, because at the end of the day, the communications are the biggest piece, and they're never not going to be hard. But if we have some strategies to present, ideally it makes it a little bit more streamlined for you guys. So just reviewing what we covered last session. So your marketing investment strategy is calculated based on your acquisition, your conversion rate, and your cost per lead. So to break this down, what you are recommending a franchisee spends is directly influenced by how much their customers, it costs to get a single customer, their average sale size, and then their lifetime or annual value, i.e. recurring revenue. That cost per acquisition is directly influenced by your cost per lead and your conversion rates. So a customer walks in the store, are you converting them? Is it an automatic sale? Are you upselling? Or if you're in like a service business, you're getting in a lead, you're doing an estimate, and then eventually getting a sale. Your conversion rate is directly influenced by that sales process, the amount of time it takes, your tech stack, think call center, reputation and reviews. Then of course your industry, your season, that average sale size. Mind you that the funnel for a deck at $4,000 to $5,000 is going to be different than someone who is selling a cheeseburger, and promotions as well. And then that cost per lead is directly influenced by the monetary investment, the local time investment, and then of course brand, industry, season, etc. These little icons on the side show you the primary department that influences these pieces exactly. So ops is usually the primary ones behind, what the ticket size is, what is the loyalty structure, basically the foundations of how the business is built. Marketing is usually behind the helm of this acquisition cost, right? Who's running our ads? Are they running them properly? What does that sales process look like? The nurturing process. Conversion rate is split, heavy ops, but also marketing influenced. And then of course that cost per lead is, I would say, split between the franchisor marketing department as well as the local owner. We all know that if a local owner is out doing a lot of local marketing, that blended cost per lead is going to decrease because of the referrals, the organic traffic. Whereas if they're not, obviously that cost per lead is going to go up, but hopefully within reason based on the suppliers that we have chosen, or if our team is doing it internally. And again, so a ROAS formula, the simplest way to do that is to take your revenue, let's say monthly revenue, and divide it by that franchisee's marketing spend. This is going to net you typically, a decimal point number. Think 6.33, 8.12. It's typically seen in a ratio format. So example, 6 to 1, which means for every $1 spent, you're seeing $6 in return. Now, what is also important is to do your cost per acquisition formula. And what that is your revenue divided by your average sale size, which gives you your standard number of customers. And then you can take your marketing spend, divide it by your number of customers, and show you exactly how much your customers cost you, or how much it costs to get a customer. So you can't simply tell a franchisee, hey, your ROAS are X and it is below industry standards, because in our world, we anticipate, and usually as a franchisor, the ROAS are within industry standards, if not better. If they're not, then you can say it's probably a functionality of something the franchisor is or isn't doing. So let's just say we're at least at industry standards. I think we would assume that a franchisee would be like, okay, cool, the marketing's working, let's invest more. They do not do that. Most will not know what to do with that information, let alone be proactive with it. I think the proactive is the biggest keyword here. In fact, many will actually refute the data altogether, because at the end of the day, the franchisor is always wrong. I'm not making enough money, marketing's not working. So it helps to actually give them a full context ending with the ROAS. So instead of, hey, your ROAS are X, which is, meeting industry standards, we would have to break this down to, hey, with your break even at X, your revenue goals of X, we're recommending you spend X in marketing. This is because with your cost per acquisition at X, your average sale at X, and your recurring revenue at X, and your conversion rates, we know that your ROAS is X. I'm saying X so many times, but you get it. This is what we typically see in the brand or the industry. And then that said, with this recommended marketing spend, here is where we recommend you invest it based on our attribution, our funnel stages, and what we're seeing system-wide data. So this is a better way to explain it. I would beg to say that the majority of business coaches probably don't have these numbers at the ready, let alone do the marketing coaches. So this is something that we need to start streamlining just industry-wide. I know franchising is not industry, but industry-wide, so that the communications can be pretty succinct between marketing and operations. So, for example, this is a real life example that I did with a franchisee. This franchisee was very vocal and very, very did not like me. And I always say, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to make you money. If you make money by the end of this, great, we can have a beer or we cannot. But my whole point here is to make you money. So I pull, and he was the marketing doesn't work. I used to get leads. So what I did was pull his 3 month totals, and then I broke it down to what that average would be. You can see that based on our cost per lead, our digital cost, our estimate, our job size, and our revenue, that if we were to increase his spend by $1,500, he would make X. So basically we were looking at making, with a $15 added investment, he would stand to increase $15,000 that month. Now, I had explained to this franchisee multiple times what his ROAS were, why we were telling him to increase his spend. But until I gave him this breakdown and told him dollar-wise, if nothing else were to change in your business, and we just changed the variable of the marketing spend, here's what you could make. We also took into account, hey, we're going into busy season. I don't want marketing to get all the credit for it already going to be busier. Listen, I get that. No one wants marketing. Everyone wants marketing to be successful, but they also don't, right? So, a way to combat this is I said, hey, you've been in business for 7 years. Let's go look over the May to June and the June to July increase in general, because he's not someone who increases his marketing spend very often. And we can say, what's the average percentage you're going to see in an increase? We'll just subtract that from what you see, and then we'll be able to tell how much the increased marketing spend was actually worth. So that is another way to combat that. If you do not have, that kind of data, that's something that you could say, hey, this is what we're striving to look for. And you say we have to start somewhere. So on top of that, I said, look, I would love for you to have an even better return, but instead of spending more, I would need you to do more. And he responded with, I would love a lower cost. I'm not going to do more local marketing. I like my time off. And I think that's fine. I'm not here to convince him to do more locally as long as he's going to spend to cover what he's not going to do locally. So we showed the franchisee the real-time data. We modeled it in the marketing revenue calculator, which I'll show you next. Confirmed their ROAS and what that means. So instead of just telling them, hey, you're at an 18-to-1, I also said, or a 15-to-1. I said, for every, 1,500, you're going to make $15,000. The expectations were set about what was not going to happen. And then he did, in fact, go and increase spend. And the way that we monitored this was said, okay, let's run it for a month, and then let's meet again and look over the numbers. And again, you're going to have that data in real time, whether it's conversion rates, average job size. So you're going to be able to go back and see that even if we don't hit an additional 15,000, well, why was that? Was it truly because the marketing didn't produce the amount of leads it should have, or did your average ticket size go down? Did your cost per lead go up? What are the variables changing? And so what I talked about earlier is, when you're calculating ROAS, you also want to take into account the variables that go into that. So we will kind of go into that next. But I wanted to show you this. Feel free to screenshot it. These are industry average return on ad spend that you would see, just franchise and non-franchise overall. So again, it's not something that is astronomical, which a lot of franchisees would expect. I see Craig on here who, in swim school. So he's looking for every dollar that his franchisee invests, they're going to get between $2 and $4 in revenue. I think a lot of franchisees think they're going to invest $1 and make 20. That is just not something that happens. So a lot of times pulling industry averages is very helpful for franchisees to also see, expectation wise, why would we expect to see 20 when nobody in the industry is seeing that? And these are, you can Google, if your industry is not on here, you could easily Google it and it will come up. So again, we're going to talk more about the variables, but I wanted to show you a presentation that I often actually do as a keynote when I go into, a brand and they're saying, hey, the marketing's not working, the franchisees are resistant, the data's not hitting like it should. What do I do? So I'm going to take you through this presentation. I think that there's bits and pieces that you could pull out for your own comms, if not presentations. And I'm also happy to share this if you want. And just hear kind of my talking points of as I'm addressing franchisees in real time. And I've probably used this across, I would say, 10 or 12 brands at this point. So I have a kind of good understanding of what questions come up. And have altered the presentation accordingly. So again, I'm going to speak to you like you're a franchisee, and hopefully you can pull some pieces out of this. My goal is to not take 45 minutes. Hopefully we can take half an hour and then leave some time for Q&A at the end. So, we start with, I'm a franchisee, now what? What now? Well, we want to operate as any good franchisor would, under the structure of what I call ACE, which is accountability, communication, and expectation. But before we get into how that's going to happen, we need to do some level setting. The first and foremost is that when we're talking about who and where, we're talking about you and your business in your local marketing. We are not talking about the brand as a whole. We are not talking about your region. We are talking about you, Sally, as a small business owner. That is how we are addressing our recommendations and how you should think about your business. And the reason is that A lot of franchisees expect that becoming part of a franchise brand means automatic business. And there is just simply no world where you become a franchisee and you automatically just get leads. The fact that McDonald's, Wendy's, Dunkin', they all have required marketing spends, whether it's locally or in a co-op. Why would we want to assume that even the biggest brands in the world are requiring marketing? Why we wouldn't? And so setting that expectation that, your success is going to come in hopefully the combination of time and cash investment, it simply cannot come out of nothing. So unless you are, let's say, a Buffalo Wild Wings, and as a franchisee, you're paying to be part of the larger co-op and not handling any of the local marketing yourself. That said, you still have that cash investment. So then we want to go into the what. What did you buy? You bought into a franchise because there's expedited success, processes, procedures, training, marketing. You bought in to lower your risk. There's a proven brand and model. You've got buying power. There's support structures. There's brand equity. So what does your exit plan look like? You have increased value when you're part of a larger brand. There's also an ease of a sale. And then you've got the community. You've got your peer community, and you've got your corporate office as well. What you didn't buy is a business in a box. And I know that you guys are probably all shaking your heads because how many times have we had to say this to franchisees? But buying into a franchise system reduces your risk and accelerates your success. It doesn't mean you can work any less hard. And the same goes for the franchisor. And this is when I start to see eyes starting to widen and going, wait, what do you mean? I know I didn't buy a business in a box, but what do you mean I can't work any less hard? I'm working hard. Think of yourself as a business owner first and a franchisee second. And this always gets people up in arms. That's not why I pay fees. Hear me out. If we have Alex and he decides that he is going to work at 100% of his capacity, he's a small business owner, not a franchise. We'll call success break even. He might hit break even in 12 months. Now, if he works at 50% of his capacity, he might hit break even in 18, 24 months. Now, if that same Alex is a part of a franchise system and he works at 100% of his capacity, he's probably going to hit break even in 6 months. But if he works 50%, it might be 12 months. So this kind of scale helps franchisees understand that the franchise itself is not going to, the franchise name is not going to allow them to grow exponentially on its own. That is reliant on their actual efforts. And of course, the harder they work, the quicker things are going to happen, even especially in comparison to a regular small business, because again, of that proven system and scalability. So then you want to ask, especially when you're in one-on-one calls, what is this person's why? And I know it sounds super cheesy and you're like, oh, yeah, everyone has a different goal. But I think it's important sometimes for them to have this in mind is, why did you open this? Is it because you are fulfilling a passion? You want to be your own boss? You love health and wellness? Whatever it is. Do you want to be your own boss? Do you want to control your own schedule? Is it that freedom aspect? Is it financial rewards? Are you looking to break even and then again, build wealth? Or are you looking primarily for, a legacy and succession? Are you building a community or personal legacy? Are you giving it off to your kids? It's a good reminder of this is the why you started a business in the first place. Now, let me tell you how the franchise is going to assist you in getting to this why. So then we want to talk about the when. How many times have you heard a franchise? I've been open 4 months. I can't even pay myself. And you're like, yeah, obviously. So I like to remind people, the short term, year 1 and 2, we're training, we're opening, we're hiring, we're figuring out our sales, we're gathering some marketing programs and data. We're looking to hit break even and probably some reinvestment, whether it's a second truck, whether it's, more in your marketing. And then the long term, year 3 through 10, now we're talking about optimization and innovation. Now it's about customer service, that attrition, Now you're probably looking at a salary or distributions and even maybe greater expansion. So, the reminder to franchise business owners that if we're looking for you to take a salary in year one, I mean, that's great if, benchmarking wise, your system can do it. But if the standard is, let's say 12 to 18 months to operational break even, well, then we need to set the expectation early, especially for franchisees that think that they're different, even though, the data very much says otherwise, that these are the expectations. So while they can certainly be upset that they cannot pay themselves in the first 5-6 months, the expectation was, 12 to 18 months. And if by that time, they're still behind, then we can take a serious look at maybe what the franchisor is failing on. Otherwise, having it in writing and having it be just vocally expressed that, we understand your frustrations and you want to pay yourself sooner. We can give you a plan to do that, but it's also going to require more time and investment. So, it's kind of a snake eating its own tail. And again, we understand it, but, that is simply just not the expectation that we have for the brand. It's crazy how many times franchisees, they get so excited in the dev process. And, I've worked with some fabulous development guys and I hear their speech. I'm like, we're going to get the best franchisees. They're giving them the real talk. And no matter what, there's always a subset of franchisees that as soon as they open, it's that patience, it's that uncertainty that starts to lead back to needing to be reassured at what the benchmarks is they're looking for and what that long game it is. Because again, this is a marriage. So how are we going to do that? We, as a franchisor, have strategic focus. We're talking about local marketing that we are on top of. And we're also talking about economic flexibility. What is happening in the economy? Is it a political year? Is it a pandemic? Is it, what is it in a recession? What does that flex in the economy look like? And how does that affect the businesses overall? We're talking about data-driven decisions. Not only do we need to know your numbers, you need to know your numbers. And you also need to know the benchmarks that you're supposed to hit. It's amazing how many times I'll say, okay, raise your hand if you know your cost per acquisition. Maybe if I'm lucky, half the room goes up. And I say, how much are you investing in marketing? Oh, a bunch of hands go down. Well, who's, operationally accountable for your marketing data? No hands go up. So things of that size. I don't want to just know how much revenue you're making. I need to know, your COGS, your marketing spend, and the franchisees should too. And that's on them to know. We're going to have communication. So peer-to-peer, franchisee to franchisor, and then the collaboration. You have to follow the model, but we also understand that there are going to be differences in regional versus national. I don't expect Florida to deliver the same way as Oregon does. So what does that look like and how do we support it? So this is, the biggest visualizer that I've seen, and I can't even take credit for it because my husband came up with it for our own businesses. But when we go back to this marketing revenue calculator, this has been the easiest way to help franchisees visualize exactly what their dollars mean to them. So if you don't have conversion rates, you can just hide these. Or make them 100%. It's very customizable. You can even add in a line for recurring revenue. But essentially what we can show them is based on how much revenue we're looking to drive and our current benchmarks, whether it be cost per lead, conversion rates, or average ticket amount, then how many leads they would need, how many, let's say, trials or estimates they would need, and how many sales. And based on this number and this number specifically, that's how much they would need to invest. Now, when I talk about variables, oftentimes I show a franchisee this and I say, remember, this is if nothing changed in your business. If you decide that you are going to invest, let's say, $1,000 more, but at the same time, you're also going to test a new call center. You want it all shifted from Google to Meta. And, oh, by the way, you're also going to go do, 8 different local shows. Well, now there's a lot of different variables that are going into whether or not this marketing is calculation is going to work, because all of those things have variable differences for each one of these numbers. So oftentimes what I tell franchisees is, as they are exploring increasing their marketing spend, which I would argue is probably the biggest hurdle we have as franchisors right now, they're just not spending enough, that I would say, hey, while I would love for us to make a whole bunch of revamps and changes, my recommendation is this. We know that that you're currently investing, let's say $2,000, and you're hitting 40,000. Well, you want to make those numbers didn't make sense. Just pretend that made sense. You want to make $10,000 more. And in order to do that, you need to invest about $3,000. Why don't we hold off on switching any sort of differences in your call center or anywhere that could affect your cost per lead, meaning if you're changing from Google to Meta? Because again, if nothing else changed in this business and you just went about as daily business as usual, you should hit that. Now, why don't we run this for a month and then see, hey, were our calculations close? Because if so, now we can start altering different pieces of where might be cracked. Like for instance, this 46, can we get it to 50? Why are we not getting the trial classes, the estimates over the finish line? Once we attack that, then can we say, hey, what if we increased it $30? How much is that going to have a flex? So making sure that increase in marketing spend has a true reflection on the changes that are being made. Now, if you have a franchisee that says, well, I can't spend money I don't have, well, then the question goes to, hey, if that's the case, I understand, how do I get this cost per lead lower? And the way that I do that is by using the blended cost per lead, which basically takes into account the organic as well, whether it's form fills, whether it's walk-ins. And the way to increase those organic ones, so we'll say quote unquote free leads, is by doing things locally and your time. So if we cannot invest dollars, we need to figure out then where those hours are going to come from in order for you to get this. Let's say this needs to be cut in half in order to hit that same amount if nothing else changes. So that's where you have to then explore the local marketing piece. And then the last thing I would say is you often will have franchisees that are not even investing enough that will penetrate the market. I call it, putting $1 of gas in your gas tank and complaining that it couldn't get cross country. Well, you can manipulate these numbers to show, hey, how much should I have made if I invest $300? Well, I did this once for a franchisee who was, we'll just say straight up rude to me. And I said, listen, by your numbers in the calculation, with you investing, I think he was investing it was like $150 a month, you should have made $17. If you didn't make $17, we need to have a chat. But my guess is that you did make that, but it's still not enough. And the over under here is, I can't make a mountain out of a molehill. So I'm going to need more in order to drive more. And that's usually where those conversations end. But it's a good way to show them how much they can, based on their local numbers, how much they can anticipate making if they're only spending $300, $400, and that's a good place to show accountability as well. So, on this, another thing that I usually recommend is, have some sort of coaching notes that go along with every call. Talk about the successes, their points of concern, note the brand benchmarks as well as what the franchisee is seeing. This is going to help whether you have a separate marketing coaching team and ops coaching team be kind of a home base. It also will help with next steps. If you have a franchisee that's, we'll say the operations meter is red because they are behind on all of their payments and, they want to sell and they're just being mean to everyone. Well, then marketing can say, hey, until this is resolved, we are not going to have one-on-one calls with them. Or if this is a new owner that's, trying to meet, twice a week, you can say, hey, we've met 4 times already this month. We've got to give the data and the money time to work. Let's meet again on X. So just a nice way to kind of keep those tons of franchisee requests at bay. Another good way to do it is a ticketing system. There's one that's Freshdesk. It's like $35 a month with unlimited users. You can also track those here as well when that comes to like one-on-one marketing pieces. So then of course, when we had this and I said, okay, here's $3,000, go invest it. They're going to say, okay, where? Well, then you want to look at, probably month over month, because there is going to be some seasonality and regionality where you would recommend they spend that budget. Okay. So I would probably say out of $3,000, we're going to have $2,200 in PPC and LSA. Let's throw $500 in Meta. And then we'll have another, $200 for a local event. I don't recommend direct mail in September because of XYZ. And then you can track what they actually spent. Most of the times they will not spend what you're telling them to do, or not in the correct areas. So this is a good way also to track accountability. And then if you want to get real in depth with it, you can also add a piece that's, what did those results look like? How much did they spend? What were their clicks? What were their leads? What was the clients, i.e. the revenue, and per channel, what does that cost per lead or cost per acquisition looks like? This is a lot for every franchise, and I've only ever seen one franchise that has automated it. The problem with automating something like this is that it enables them to do even less and know their numbers even less. So how do we strike that balance between making sure the franchisor is being accountable for their marketing? They're not just assuming that the suppliers or the home office is running it for them, but also making it, business owner friendly. I haven't come up with a great solution yet. But that's more to come on that because there's gotta be a better way. But again, I think right now the biggest concern I have is actual spend and getting franchisees to understand that just as they have to spend time looking at the data in their accounting and their KPIs, they need to treat marketing the same. So then we kind of go into this local marketing tracker and results. Do I think a franchisee is going to fill this out? Absolutely not. But if I give them the ability to do so, and I have some franchisees that do it, I'm going to get some pretty incredible data from it. So what this means is giving them a list of their top places that they could do local marketing. Like I've said before, if you tell a franchisee, go out and be the mayor of your town, kiss babies, and shake some hands. Well, remember, most franchisees that we brought on are not expert marketers. They're going to be like, where do I find a baby? Where do I shake a hand? I don't know what to do. So giving them a complete task list of here's some things you can do: flyers, yard signs, A-frames, BNI, cold calling. Now we want to track those efforts. How many hours have you put in? If it's collateral, how many did you hand out? 250 flyers, 100 door hangers? How much did that collateral cost? Did you have an employee do it? Did you have your son do it? How much did you pay them? Did you do an event? How much did that event cost? So you can then take what those total costs are. And guess what? Your average cost per lead. So let's say how many leads came from it? How many, what are our lead goals? What are our client goals? What can we estimate that we get from here? Month one or the beginning of this is going to be tough because you're just shooting from the hip based on digital cost per lead and CPA goals. But you can have revenue goals behind it. And then you can say, whether it's QR scans, promo codes, call tracking numbers, kind of attribute approximately how many leads came from each one. And then, clients and the attributed revenue. So then eventually you can say, hey, by doing BNI networking, my cost per lead is 2 hours, or my cost per acquisition is, 2 hours of my time, and I net $1,500 in referral revenue. So essentially getting down to their time invested doing X is going to equal X in revenue, or their cost invested in X equals X in revenue. So for instance, if they exhibit at a home show, how much were those event costs and personnel costs? How much revenue did they get from it? How many hours was it? And how much did they spend? If it's flyers, and let's say the flyers they had for free, well, they actually ended up getting $1,000 in revenue because they've got 300 leads from it and whatever, half of them closed. But in doing that, we spent 12 hours, right? So 12 hours for, that amount of revenue, and then you divide it by hour. This is how much your hour is worth doing flyers. So we can break it down as much as possible. What I found in doing this is oftentimes franchisees just want a list of things to do. And what I tell them is, my goal here is to see what works well for who you are as a person or your team and your actual regional area, so that I can take this, whatever it is, 12, 15 things, and break it down to 3. And I can say, hey, guess what? Sponsoring and exhibiting at events doesn't really net much for you, but we know that when you attend and you hand out business cards, you actually see a big spike in revenue because of leads. So we're going to keep that. We know influencers don't work for you, but yard signs work really well. So now we've slimmed it down to 3 or 4 things that they should do or task out to their team from those local efforts, which then, again, what I tell franchisees is our goal is to have a formula that has you do the least amount of marketing efforts and the least amount of investment to net the most. Our goal here is not to spend all of your time doing marketing and all of your money. That is not a system. Our system is, how can we get the most out of the least? And this is a way that definitely helps do that when we're talking about their actual time and efforts. So again, a formula for local marketing that we want franchisees to understand is that their time doing X is going to equal X in revenue. So yes, they can sit on the couch with wine instead of going to the BNI, which is going to equal 0 in revenue, or by spending 3 hours going to this BNI, I typically make $1,500 in revenue. Now I understand, what that is worth, and then they can make that decision. Or if they don't want to do that, what their cost invested in having someone else go, if I'm not doing it and I'm paying someone to go, what does that net out for me as well? And finally, you kind of end with, what we need to do is gain clarity on the optimal allocation of the franchisee's time within their business. It's always going to flex and change. That's why we have recurring calls. You need to have a balance so that the business supports you rather than the other way around. We always say we work on the business, not in the business. But when money gets tight, they go back in the business and have a very hard time getting out of that. But we cannot have them hit their whys, which, as a reminder, is this, until they get back to working on their business. And that's where we have to rely on the data. So that is the presentation that I walk franchisees through. I think it's an important talking point in realigning, where they stand, what the accountability measures are, and how to focus on all different parts of their business. The biggest suggestion I usually have coming out of this is, when you go back, I want you guys to understand and you should know by heart, month over month, your conversion rates, your average CPA, and your average sale size. And, what are your revenue goals? A lot of times they don't have a goal. They just want to make more. And so, explaining that there is a formula behind this is super helpful. And also saying, hey, who on your team, you or someone else, should be accountable for the month over month marketing metrics. So if at the end of the month, I email your team and say, hey, what was your total number of leads? What was your total, CPA? Who do you want that to be? Now, if you were to ask the same thing about accounting and finance, it'd probably always be them. And it wouldn't be a question of, well, why? Who should do that? It should be the same amount of responsibility for the marketing. And just as they wouldn't rely on the franchisor to manage all of their finances and accounting and COGS, et cetera, they shouldn't also be relying on marketing to handle all of those metrics as well. So again, that is kind of my suggestions of comms and how to approach it moving forward. Like I said, we do have some time for questions and answers, and I will also put in our recap access to the marketing revenue calculator. I'm happy to share it, and you can edit it for your businesses as you see fit. But it really helps give a data-driven reason for why we are telling them to invest in certain areas of their marketing. And again, why we are also telling them to invest in certain places. This marketing, for the most part, isn't rocket science. You don't need a million different outlets. You just need the outlets that work, and you need to fund them appropriately. And then that is also covered in recordings number 1 and 2 as well. So I'll open this up. What questions, if any, does anyone have for me? I'm going to try to go back to a slide that might be helpful for you guys too. And if there's no questions, then we can end early. It's always awkward when I'm hosting a webinar because I'm just talking to myself, basically.
That is a question more so on like the delivery of your like meetings with the charts that you were showing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you like sitting there with the franchisees one-on-one, or are you more so like delegating that to an FBC?
So that's a good question. I think for the most part, and this is kind of why I'm running these trainings, the FBCs are not, I don't want to say educated, but they don't have enough understanding of how the marketing works to speak to it. So they often pass it to the marketing person. So what I think the best case scenario would be is that, you know, ops and marketing should have a weekly standing meeting, and they should be going over these pieces and having the marketing revenue calculator open and being like, this is the benchmark. And then ideally it would be on that franchise business coach to discuss and talk about first. And then if a question gets elevated, such as, well, what about, you know, the differences in the meta campaigns from creative A or B, then you're going to elevate it to marketing. But franchise business coaches, for the most part, their entire job is to meet with franchisees and talk about their businesses. Marketing, for the most part, has to do that on top of managing all of the other strategies. So usually I say, if we can get the FBCs understanding the basics of how these numbers all work together, then we can kind of mitigate having to have pull time away from the marketing, and then bring them in when it's more advanced questions.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I think this is a good slide too. All right. Well, if there is no other questions, I will let you guys go 20 minutes early today. That said, all of these recordings will be sent out. They're going to be hosted on Your Franchise Group. That is a portal that Adam Contos, who is current partner at Area 15 Ventures and the former CEO of Remax, created. I think LinkedIn and, you know, Eric Van Horn's Facebook group, combined with just a resource section and dedicated places for both franchisees and franchisors to talk. My goal here is not to present data that you have to spend. So we'll send you, you know, a 3-month coupon code so you guys can download anything you want. But I'll get that out hopefully in the next day or two. And again, feel free to email me at any time. I do a lot of fractional CMO work. I do work with a lot of brands, so I'm always happy to help as needed. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thanks, Maddie. Yep.